I don't know where to start, but let's start with remembering that 67 people lost their lives last night, and you're seeing on your screen that image of the rescue operations that are still underway at the Potomac. I want to go to Aaron Gilchrist, who is with us, as is NBC aviation analyst Jeff Gazzetti. Aaron, after a moment of silence, a mountain of criticism.
I think that's an absolutely fair way to put it, Jose. You and I have covered many instances. I've been in Washington since the first Obama administration, through these different presidents that have been here. And this is the first time after a tragedy where 67 lives were presumed to have been lost that we've had a president come to the podium, offer words of condolence, and then criticize it's seemingly the pilots in the helicopter, the air traffic controllers. It is remarkable. It is absolutely unusual and remarkable to have the president say, as he did, that he believes this was a confluence of bad decisions, that he was critical of the helicopter's movements. You heard the Secretary of Defense say that there was certainly an elevation issue that with the helicopter. The president went on to say that, to suggest that DEI policies and programs from the previous administration somehow played a role in this, to the extent that perhaps the people who were operating these aircraft or people in the control tower weren't smart enough to be doing the job. He did say that this is a country in mourning, Jose, and certainly that is the case for so many of us, as we know now that 67 lives have likely been lost in this air collision.
President Trump speaking from the White House press briefing room. After a brief moment of silence, he pretty immediately made this political, blaming DEI and the Democrats on that mid-air collision without providing evidence. He was a little bit all over the map, talking about DEI policies in the FAA, but then questioning the helicopter and the altitude and why it didn't, in his words, stop or make another move. I want to go to our experts, including our CNN aviation correspondent Pete Montine and CNN's Renee Marsh. Pete, bottom line, are DEI policies at the FAA to blame?
I put my head in my hands, Pam, when the president said that. This is something that has been pushed by the far right for a few months now, that DEI policies are to blame in a degradation of safety in aviation in the United States. But frankly, the president is getting out ahead of his skis here. What he has said is not only unprofessional, unpresidential, inconsiderate of the status of this investigation, but frankly, it is just unhinged. That he could even say with any sort of certainty that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies had any part to play in this accident. Remember that 67 people are dead. I hate to get so upset here, but this is something that investigators will really need to pick apart piece by piece, and that is going to take some really significant time. We're not even 24 hours after this crash. We're barely even 12 hours after this crash. And he is saying with a lot of certainty that the blame is on DEI, and the blame is in some ways on air traffic control and air traffic controller hiring. I have to feel for the air traffic controllers in the tower at Reagan National Airport who had to essentially sit there helplessly and make the call to first responders to say we have a serious aircraft crash at 8:48 last night. Let's parse out some more of this, because it's really significant here that President Trump also put some of the blame on Democrats. He said that Transportation Secretary, now former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, engaged in BS. He actually used the full word live on television. The fact of the matter is that Transportation Secretary Buttigieg was very hard on aviation safety. There was a day-long safety stand down because of the rise of near collisions on the runways at commercial airports nationwide that really took off in 2023. I did a sit-down interview with Buttigieg. He was well-versed on the topic. He knew the points. He knew where the blind spots were, and the FAA and the Department of Transportation from the top down of the Biden administration was taking that problem very seriously. He also was incredibly hard on airlines and consumer protections. The big bottom line here is that there are so many vacancies in the federal government when it comes to aviation safety. There is no administrator of the FAA right now. President Trump has not put somebody forth for that. There is no administrator of the Transportation Security Administration. The Trump administration needs to put somebody forth for that as well. Sean Duffy is the Transportation Secretary. He spoke articulately. I will point out that I did not hear from NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy, who was in the press room. That is really significant, especially during something like this. It is a huge tragedy, and I do not use that word lightly.
It is a huge tragedy. We still don't have the answers. As our Caitlin Collins asked him, President Trump, aren't you getting ahead of this investigation because we don't have those answers? And when he was pressed further about how he can blame DEI, when he also can say in the same sentence he doesn't know if it's the air traffic controller's fault, raising questions about the helicopter pilot, he said it's just common sense. But again, what we need to remember here are there are 67 families who are mourning because of this mid-air collision, who are looking for answers, who don't want politics, they want answers, and they are mourning the loss of their loved ones. And that is what we need to remember in this moment.
And following the breaking news on the devastating mid-air collision between an American Airlines passenger jet and a military Black Hawk helicopter. First, I want to show you live pictures of the Potomac River. First responders have been working tirelessly since last night, overnight, to recover bodies from the frigid waters in the Potomac River. Tragically, all 67 people on board the two aircraft are presumed to have perished, making this the deadliest aviation disaster in the United States in more than 20 years. As this is happening, the President of the United States went into the White House briefing room and almost immediately began to blame Democrats for the diversity programs that were in place, suggesting, as he admitted without evidence, that perhaps...
Captain Cox, let me start with you because we are obviously in the middle of this crisis. Bodies are still being pulled out of the water. The investigation is just getting going. We hear the president say DEI policies may have contributed to this. What's your reaction to what we just heard in that press conference?
Bluntly, I think there's no foundation in fact for a statement like that. One thing that has to be remembered is that there are standards for everyone in aviation, notably in a safety critical position, be it pilots, be it flight attendants, be it dispatchers, be it air traffic controllers. So the standards have never changed. And to allege that somehow these pilots were substandard or the controllers were substandard without any evidence of that, I think is at the minimum, it's very premature and it's without foundation of fact. It is contrary to everything that worldwide accident investigation protocols and processes demand. We look for objective information and we look to determine facts. And that allegation of some reference to DEI does not have at this point any facts underneath it to support such a statement.
Yamiche, you were listening in. You have covered Washington for many, many years. As you were listening, do we know what the president was trying to accomplish and what stood out to you?
Well, it was striking. The president started off by being a consoler-in-chief, talking about the fact that he wanted to take a moment of silence for these families whose loved ones, as you said, are still being pulled from the Potomac River as we speak. But then he made a hard pivot, and that hard pivot was to attacking Democrats, attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, attacking former President Obama and former President Biden, as well as the former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. And I think it really it's striking that President Trump said that the way that he came to the idea that diversity had something to do with this was because he has, quote, common sense. He was asked directly, do you have any evidence that shows that diversity programs led to this crash or contributed in any way? And he didn't give any evidence. All he said was that common sense led him to believe this. Now, we know that the president, when he was campaigning, as well as this first few weeks of his presidency, that he's made attacking diversity, equity, inclusion programs programs a key part of his administration, and it made it a key part of his campaign. But I think in this moment, there's still a lot of questions of why he came to that, even though he's saying it's because of common sense. So I think there are a lot of people that I'm now in touch with who are frankly very surprised that the president went there, that the president talked about this. We still don't know very much about why this crash happened or the sort of identities of the pilots here. So I think it just begs the question that there are a lot of questions that need to be answered here. And President Trump, frankly, a lot of people are seeing that he wasn't giving a lot of answers. In fact, he was just sort of going back to the things that he's gone to, culture war issues, diversity issues, and in a moment where I think a lot of the nation was waiting for him to give more concrete answers, Anna.
Chris, you're there at the river.
Donald tried to play the blame game. He opened this up to make this political. Right, first and foremost, this is a tragedy with human lives lost. You know, the people on both vehicles, right? It's a major aviation tragedy, one of the biggest in American history, right? Certainly when it comes to ones that are accidents, right? At least that's what the reporting suggests. It's one of the biggest in modern American history. But Donald's the one that instantly tried to make it political. When he went out there and tried to blame wokeness and the Democrats and DEI and all of the right-wing buzzwords that he could cram into a soundbite. But guys, if one person can take a blame, and of course, when something like this happens, hundreds, thousands of people played a role, so boiling it down to one person is difficult. But if you can, it's Donald. Because Donald and his party have been the party of regulatory cuts. Many Republicans supported increasing the load of traffic at this airport. In addition, guys, it was the real president, and he is there on behest of Donald Trump, and there's plenty of articles and all sources, you can go read this, that Donald and Elon basically went out and had the previous FAA boss quit. So there's been a vacancy. So at a critical juncture where Trump's trying to blame woke and DEI, it was actually his buddy, his White House buddy Musk, that went in there and tried to force the guy out, the previous guy. So the organization that's predominantly responsible for all of this was leaderless, not because it's a traditional, turnover after an election. This is not a position that automatically becomes vacant when a new president comes in. But Elon and Trump, in their lust for revenge against any Democratic appointee, made the country less safe, and then this happened.